Dramily.com, unlimited drama series.
The muddy high heels by the front door told me everything I needed to know. Vanessa had been somewhere she shouldn't have been, doing something she shouldn't have been doing. I'm Eddie Frawley, and I run Frawley's Auto Repair on the outskirts of Pine Harbor, Maine. It's not much to look at. A converted garage with 2 bays and a small office that smells like motor oil and coffee, but it's mine. At 38, I've learned to read the signs. Cars tell stories through their wear patterns, their scratches, their secrets hidden under the hood. People aren't much different. Those heels were Vanessa's favorites, the black Jimmy Choos she'd bought for her promotion at TechFlow Solutions. She'd never worn them to any girls' night out I knew about. The mud wasn't from our driveway either. It was red clay, the kind you find up by Miller's Pond, where the rich folks from Portland rent summer cabins. It was past midnight when she finally crept through the front door, trying to balance those ridiculous shoes in one hand while fumbling with her keys. I was sitting in my recliner in the dark, nursing a beer and waiting. "Eddie, you awake?" Her voice carried that fake sweetness she used when she was lying. "Just watching The Late Show," I said, clicking on the lamp. She jumped like I'd fired a gun. Vanessa was still beautiful at 32, with that sharp-featured look that photographs well for company newsletters. Her blonde hair was mussed, and there was something different about her lipstick. Or rather, the lack of it. She'd left the house wearing that dark red shade she loved. Now, her lips were bare. "How was book club?" I asked. "Oh, same old drama. Jennifer's going through her divorce, and Tara's having issues with her new boyfriend." She kicked off the heels and headed for the stairs. "I'm exhausted. Don't wait up." But I'd already seen what I needed to see. There was a wine glass in the kitchen sink. 1 glass, not 2. The lipstick stain on the rim wasn't Vanessa's dark red. It was a lighter shade, almost pink. And unless Jennifer or Tara had developed a 5 o'clock shadow, the faint stubble marks around the rim told a different story entirely. I waited until I heard the shower running upstairs, then went to check her purse. Vanessa was usually careful, but people get sloppy when they think they're winning. Tucked behind her wallet was a phone I'd never seen before, a cheap prepaid flip phone that had no business being in the purse of a woman who lived on her iPhone. The text history made for interesting reading. "Can't wait to see you again. C. Eddie's working late tomorrow. My place? V. You deserve so much better than him. C. I know. Soon. V." I photographed every message, every call log, every piece of evidence. Then, I put the phone back exactly where I'd found it and went to bed. Vanessa was already asleep or pretending to be. Either way, I had work to do. The next morning, she was all smiles and coffee kisses, chattering about her day while I ate my eggs in silence. She was meeting Kelsey for lunch, she said. Kelsey was her new work friend, a sharp-dressed woman from the city who'd been filling Vanessa's head with ideas about reaching her potential and not settling for less than she deserved. "You're quiet this morning," Vanessa said, refilling my coffee cup. "Everything okay?" "Just thinking about work. Jimmy's got that transmission rebuild, and Mrs. Patterson's Buick is making that noise again." She kissed the top of my head, and I smelled a cologne that definitely wasn't mine, lingering in her hair. "Well, don't work too hard. I might be late tonight. Kelsey wants to check out that new wine bar in Portland." Another lie. But I just smiled and nodded, watching her gather her things. She grabbed the purse with the secret phone, checked her reflection in the hall mirror, and headed out to her Honda Civic, the practical car she drove to work, saving the weekend Lexus for special occasions. I gave her a 10-minute head start, then called Jimmy. "Hey, boss, you coming in today?" "Yeah, but I need you to handle the morning appointments. I've got some personal business to take care of." "Everything okay?" Jimmy Martinez had worked for me for 5 years. He was 26, built like a linebacker, and had the kind of loyalty you can't buy. He also asked just enough questions to be helpful without being nosy. "Everything's fine. Just need to run some errands. I'll be in after lunch." I drove to TechFlow Solutions and parked across the street with a clear view of the employee parking lot. Vanessa's Honda was there, but I wasn't watching for her. I was watching for whoever owned that other phone. At 11:47 a.m., a silver Tesla Model S pulled into the lot. The driver was a man I'd never seen before. Tall, well-dressed, with the kind of artificially perfect smile you see in pharmaceutical commercials. He checked his reflection in his side mirror, straightened his tie, and walked into the building like he owned the place. I took pictures of his license plate and ran it through my friend Danny at the DMV. 20 minutes later, Danny called back. That Tesla's registered to Chad Lohman, age 34, address in Portland. No priors, but he's got 3 moving violations in the last 2 years. Seems like the type who thinks rules don't apply to him. Chad Lohman. C for Chad. It was almost insulting how predictable it was. I spent the rest of the morning doing research. Chad worked for a medical device company out of Boston, traveling up and down the East Coast schmoozing doctors and hospital administrators. His LinkedIn profile was full of buzzwords about synergistic solutions and paradigm shifts. His Facebook page showed him at expensive restaurants, charity galas, and ski resorts, always with a different woman on his arm. By the time I got to the shop, I had a plan. So let me get this straight, Jimmy said, wiping his hands on a shop rag. Your wife is cheating on you with some slick-talking salesman from Boston, and you want a what exactly? We were alone in the shop, the last customer having picked up his truck an hour ago. I'd laid out the whole situation for Jimmy, the phone, the messages, Chad Lohman, and his silver Tesla. I want to send a message, I said. Something that'll make him think twice about playing house with married women. Jimmy grinned. What kind of message we talking about here? The kind that doesn't involve anything illegal. I'm not looking to go to jail over this. But you're looking to have some fun. Something like that. The beauty of running an auto shop is that you learn to be creative with limited resources. You also learn that the most effective repairs are often the simplest ones. The same principle applies to revenge. Chad had made one crucial mistake. He'd parked that Tesla in the TechFlow lot every day for the past week, right under a security camera that hadn't worked in 3 years. I knew this because I'd done the wiring when the company first moved in, and they'd never called me back to fix the camera after a power surge fried the system. Wednesday evening, while Vanessa was supposedly at her yoga class, Jimmy and I paid a visit to the TechFlow parking lot. We didn't touch Chad's car. That would have been criminal mischief. Instead, we got creative. You sure this is going to work? Jimmy asked, holding the ladder steady while I worked. Trust me. I've been dealing with entitled jerks for 20 years. What we did was simple, elegant, and completely legal. We attached a small magnetic sign to the roof of Chad's Tesla, the kind real estate agents use, but custom made. In bright pink letters, it read, Satisfaction Guaranteed. Ask me about my performance issues. We also left a small gift on his windshield, a bottle of little blue pills with a note that said, Thought you might need these. A concerned friend. The pills were actually breath mints, but from a distance, they looked authentic enough to make a point. Thursday morning, I made sure to be at the coffee shop, across from TechFlow, when Chad discovered our handiwork. Even from 50 yards away, I could see his face turn red as he realized what was on his car. He ripped off the sign, crumpled it up, and threw it in the nearest trash can. Then he found the pills. That's when things got interesting. Instead of just throwing them away, Chad looked around to see if anyone was watching, then quickly pocketed the bottle. Either he had a sense of humor about the whole thing, or he was more insecure than his swagger suggested. I was betting on insecurity. That evening, Vanessa came home in a mood. Not angry exactly, but distracted. She kept checking her phone and sighing dramatically. Rough day at work, I asked. Oh, office politics. Sometimes I think the men in that place are just overgrown children. Problems with a coworker? She looked at me sharply. Why would you ask that? Just making conversation. You seem stressed. I'm fine, just tired. She disappeared upstairs to change clothes, and I heard her talking on the phone in hushed tones. When she came back down, she was wearing a dress I hadn't seen in months, and enough perfume to choke a horse. Going somewhere? Kelsey wants to grab dinner. Nothing fancy, just that little Italian place on Harbor Street. Another lie. The Italian place had been closed for renovations for 2 weeks. But I just smiled and waved goodbye, then called Jimmy. Phase two? He asked. Phase two. This time we followed them. Chad had picked Vanessa up at the corner of Harbor and Main. Smart enough not to come to the house, but not smart enough to realize he was being watched. They drove to a seafood restaurant 20 miles out of town, the kind of place where Portland professionals go when they want privacy. Jimmy and I didn't go inside. Instead, we waited in the parking lot and got to work on Chad's Tesla again. This time, we were more direct. You sure about this? Jimmy asked, holding the bucket of fish guts we'd gotten from Paulson's Market. He wants to play games with other people's marriages, I said, popping the hood of the Tesla. Let's see how he likes playing cleanup. We didn't damage anything. We just made sure Chad's next few drives would be memorable. A little fish oil on the air intake, some shrimp shells tucked into the cabin air filter, and a raw mackerel zip-tied to the exhaust manifold where it would cook slowly and fill the car with an unmistakable aroma. That's going to smell like low tide in hell, Jimmy said admiringly. That's the idea. We were back at my house before Vanessa and Chad finished their appetizers. I made myself a sandwich, cracked open a beer, and settled in to wait for the fireworks. They came sooner than expected. Around 10:30, my phone rang. It was Vanessa. Eddie, I need you to come pick me up. What happened to Kelsey? There was a pause. Her car broke down. We're at that little diner on Route 1, the one with the blue sign. She was getting better at lying, but she still wasn't good at it. The diner she was describing was in the opposite direction from where I'd seen them go. Which diner exactly? There are 3 places on Route 1 with blue signs. Another pause. You know what? Never mind. I'll call a cab. You sure? I don't mind driving out to get you. No, it's fine. I'll be home in an hour. She hung up before I could respond. 20 minutes later, she walked through the front door looking like she'd been through a blender. Her dress was wrinkled, her hair was a mess, and she had that slightly shell-shocked expression people get when their carefully laid plans go sideways. Rough night with Kelsey? I asked innocently. You could say that. She kicked off her shoes and headed for the stairs. I'm going to take a shower and go to bed. Sweet dreams, I called after her. But I was already planning phase 3. The thing about small towns is that everyone knows everyone else's business, whether they want to or not. In Pine Harbor, the unofficial information network runs through 3 key nodes. Paulson's Market, where all the local contractors and fishermen get their coffee. Marge's Hair Salon, where the ladies gather to discuss everything from town politics to who's sleeping with whom. And the Pine Harbor Tap, where both groups converge in the evenings to compare notes. I'd been part of this network for 20 years. Vanessa, despite living here for 8 years, had always held herself slightly apart from it. She was friendly enough, but she made it clear she considered herself destined for bigger things than small-town gossip. That attitude was about to work against her. Friday morning, I stopped by Paulson's for coffee and made sure to run into Tom Patterson, whose wife Betty ran the Church Ladies Auxiliary. Tom was a talker, and Betty was the kind of woman who could spread news faster than a forest fire. How's Vanessa doing? Tom asked, stirring sugar into his coffee. Betty saw her at that fancy restaurant out on Route 1 Wednesday night. Said she was with some fellow in a suit. Business dinner? You know Vanessa, I said carefully. Always networking. TechFlow's got her meeting with all kinds of people these days. Must be nice having a wife who's moving up in the world. It has its challenges, I said, and left it at that. Tom nodded knowingly. He'd been married for 35 years and understood the delicate balance of supporting a spouse's ambitions while maintaining your own dignity. From Paulson's, I drove to Marge's salon. I didn't go inside, that would have been too obvious. But I made sure to be working on Marge's car in the parking lot when the morning rush began. Car repairs are excellent conversation starters, and I'd learned over the years that women getting their hair done are remarkably willing to share information with the guy fixing their stylist's transmission. Eddie, honey, you're a lifesaver, Marge said, bringing me a cup of coffee. This old Buick's been acting up for weeks. Just a loose belt, I said, tightening the tensioner. Should run smooth now. You're so handy. Vanessa's lucky to have a man who can fix anything. Well, I do my best. She seems to be doing real well at that new job. Jennifer Morrison saw her having lunch with some businessman from Boston. Said he was driving one of those fancy electric cars. I looked up from the engine. Tesla? That's the one. Real smooth-looking fellow, Jennifer said. Expensive suit, nice haircut, the kind of man who knows how to treat a lady. I'm sure he is, I said, and went back to work on the belt. But Marge wasn't done. Of course, Jennifer also mentioned the car smelled something awful, like someone had left fish in it for a week. Poor man was so embarrassed he could barely eat his lunch. I had to bite my lip to keep from smiling. By the time I got to the shop, word was already spreading through Pine Harbor's gossip network. Jimmy was grinning when I walked in. Dude, you should have seen the look on that Tesla guy's face when he came by this morning. He came here? Oh yeah. Wanted to know if we did detailing work. Said his car had developed an odor problem, and his regular guy in Portland couldn't figure out what was causing it. What did you tell him? Told him we mostly work on real cars, not fancy toys. But I offered to take a look. Jimmy led me outside to where Chad's Tesla was parked in our lot.
She texted you come back to bed at 3 a.m. Last Tuesday, you told me you were at your sister's.
Watch more on Grammarly.com.
Even with all the windows down and an industrial fan running, the smell was impressive. It wasn't just fish anymore. The Maine summer heat had transformed our little prank into something approaching biological warfare. He's inside talking to Mrs. Patterson about her Buick, Jimmy said, trying to be all charming and professional. But every time the wind shifts, he starts gagging. I walked into the office and found Chad Lohman attempting to make small talk with Eleanor Patterson, who was waiting for her car and clearly enjoying the show. Chad was everything I'd expected, tall, well-groomed, with the kind of aggressive confidence that probably worked well in boardrooms and singles bars. He was also sweating through his expensive shirt and breathing through his mouth. You must be Eddie, he said, extending his hand. Chad Lohman. I was hoping you could help me with a little problem. His handshake was firm but damp, and up close I could see the stress lines around his eyes. Our little fish surprise had rattled him more than he wanted to admit. Jimmy says you've got an odor issue, I said. Mind if I take a look? We walked outside together, and I made a show of popping the hood and poking around the engine compartment. The mackerel was long gone. Probably fell off somewhere between the restaurant and here. But the smell had permeated everything. Any idea what might have caused this? Chad asked. Hard to say. Could be a dead animal got into the engine compartment. Happens more than you'd think, especially with these quiet electric cars. Mice, squirrels, sometimes even cats looking for a warm place to sleep. But the smell is so specific. Yeah, that's the weird part. Almost smells like seafood, doesn't it? Chad's jaw tightened slightly. I was thinking the same thing. You haven't been to any fish markets lately? Sometimes you can track stuff in on your shoes, it gets into the carpet. No, nothing like that. His voice was getting sharper. Look, can you fix it or not? Oh, sure, we can probably get it sorted out. Might take a few days, though. We'd need to pull the interior, clean the ventilation system, maybe replace some filters. Could run you $500. $500? These foreign cars are tricky. Lots of specialized parts. Chad looked like he was about to argue, then caught another whiff of his car and reconsidered. Fine. When can you start? Monday morning. We'll need to keep it over the weekend, though. Can't have that smell in our shop while we're working on other cars. He agreed, which meant Chad Lohman would be spending the weekend without his precious Tesla, relying on rental cars and favors from friends. More importantly, it meant Vanessa would have to find other transportation for whatever romantic adventures they had planned. After Chad left in his rental Corolla, a significant step down from the Tesla, I called my friend Danny at the DMV again. I need another favor, I said. What now? That Tesla owner, Chad Lohman. I need to know where he's staying while he's in town. Eddie, what are you up to? Nothing illegal. I just want to make sure he gets the full Pine Harbor experience. Danny sighed. He's renting a place on Elm Street, the old Morrison house, the one with the big porch. But Eddie, yeah? Be careful. Guys like that, they don't like being embarrassed. And they usually have lawyers. Don't worry. I'm not planning to do anything that would interest a lawyer. But I was planning to do something that would interest the entire town of Pine Harbor. The Pine Harbor Lobster Festival happens every August, and it's the biggest social event of the year. Everyone comes, locals, summer people, tourists from Portland and Boston. It's also the perfect place to make a very public point about satisfaction guarantees and the consequences of messing with other people's marriages. I'd been planning this for 2 weeks, ever since I learned that Chad had extended his business trip to include the festival weekend. Vanessa had been bubbling with excitement about showing him authentic Maine culture, which was rich considering she'd spent most of our marriage complaining about small town events. The festival runs Friday through Sunday on the town common with food booths, craft vendors, and a small stage for local bands. Saturday afternoon features the traditional lobster roll contest, where local restaurants compete for bragging rights and a trophy that looks like a giant crustacean. What most people don't know is that I've been the festival's unofficial tech support for the past 5 years, handling the sound system, stage lighting, and the electronic voting system for the contest. This year, I'd made some special modifications. Friday evening, I was at the common setting up equipment when Vanessa and Chad made their grand entrance. She was wearing a sundress I'd bought her for our anniversary 2 years ago, and Chad was sporting the kind of casual but expensive outfit that screams, "I summer in the Hamptons." They walked around the booths like visiting royalty, with Vanessa pointing out local landmarks and Chad nodding politely, while clearly thinking about how quickly he could get back to civilization. "Eddie!" Vanessa waved me over with the kind of forced enthusiasm she usually reserved for her boss's wife. "Come meet my friend Chad." "Chad, this is my husband Eddie I was telling you about." Chad extended his hand with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Nice to finally meet you, Eddie. Vanessa's told me so much about you." "All good things, I hope," I said, matching his grip. "How are you enjoying Pine Harbor?" "It's charming, very authentic. Wait until you try the lobster rolls tomorrow. We take our seafood seriously around here." Something flickered across Chad's face at the mention of seafood, and I had to admire his self-control. His Tesla was still sitting in my shop, probably still reeking despite Jimmy's efforts with industrial cleaners and ozone generators. "Actually," I continued, "you should enter the contest. We always need more judges, and Vanessa tells me you're something of a foodie." "Oh, I don't know. Come on, Chad," Vanessa interrupted. "It would be fun. You're always talking about that restaurant in Boston, the one with the James Beard Award." Chad looked trapped between politeness and self-preservation. "Well, if you think it would be appropriate, absolutely. I'll put you down as a celebrity judge." We announced the judges at noon, then the tasting starts at 1 o'clock. We shook hands again, and I walked away whistling. Phase 4 was in motion. Saturday morning, I was back at the Common early, making final adjustments to the sound system. The wireless microphones were working perfectly. The speakers were positioned for maximum coverage, and my special addition to the control booth was ready to go. Jimmy arrived around 10 to help with the final setup. "You sure about this, boss? Seems like you're going pretty public." "Sometimes public is exactly what you need," I said, testing the microphone levels. "Besides, I'm not doing anything wrong. Just giving people the entertainment they came for." "If you say so. But I'm staying close to the truck, just in case we need to make a quick exit." The festival was in full swing by 11, with families arriving from all over the county. The smell of fried clams and kettle corn filled the air. Kids ran around with balloons and face paint, and the local band was warming up on the stage. At 11:45, I saw Vanessa and Chad approaching the judges' table. She was practically glowing with excitement, and he was making an obvious effort to look enthusiastic about the whole thing. They took their seats at the head table, right in front of the stage where everyone could see them. At noon sharp, I stepped up to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the annual Pine Harbor Lobster Roll Contest." The crowd cheered, and I waited for them to settle down. "Before we start the judging, I'd like to introduce our panel of experts. We have Martha Paulson from Paulson's Market, representing our local seafood suppliers. We have Chef Rodriguez from the Harbor View Restaurant, representing our professional culinary community. And we have a special celebrity judge visiting us from Boston, Mr. Chad Lohman." More applause. Chad stood up and waved, looking like he was enjoying the attention despite himself. "Now, Mr. Lohman," I continued, "I understand you're something of an expert on satisfaction and performance. Is that right?" Chad looked confused but nodded. "Well, I work in sales, so customer satisfaction is certainly important. Excellent. And I'm sure our contestants will be eager to hear your professional opinion on their performance. The crowd was getting restless, ready for the actual contest to begin. But I wasn't quite finished setting the stage. Before we start the judging, I'd like to share something special with everyone. You know, in my business, I run Frawley's Auto Repair. I've learned that satisfaction really is guaranteed, as long as you're honest about what you're offering and what you're delivering. I paused, looking directly at Chad. The problems start when people make promises they can't keep, or when they try to take something that doesn't belong to them. Chad's smile was getting strained. Vanessa was looking back and forth between us, clearly sensing that something was wrong but not sure what. Which brings me to a little story I'd like to share. You see, recently I discovered that someone has been making some very specific promises to someone very close to me. Promises about satisfaction, about performance, about delivering what my current service provider apparently cannot. The crowd was getting quiet now, sensing drama. Chad was no longer smiling at all. Now, I'm a reasonable man. Competition is healthy, right? So I decided to do a little research on this new service provider. And you know what I found? I reached into my pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I found that this particular individual has a history of making big promises and failing to deliver. In fact, he's currently dealing with some pretty serious performance issues of his own. Chad started to stand up, but I kept talking. For example, did you know that his primary piece of equipment, a fancy silver Tesla, has been in my shop all week because of a persistent odor problem? Seems like something's rotten, and it's not just the fish. The crowd was dead silent now. Vanessa had gone pale, and Chad was looking around like a trapped animal. But here's the really interesting part, I continued, unfolding the paper. I have documentation showing that this individual has been making these same promises to married women all over New England. Boston, Providence, Hartford, always the same pattern. Big talk about satisfaction and performance, but when it comes time to deliver, he leaves behind nothing but bad smells and broken promises. That last part was a bluff. I didn't have any documentation about other women. But Chad's face told me I'd hit close enough to the truth to make him sweat. So I guess my question for our celebrity judge is this. When you're evaluating these lobster rolls, are you going to apply the same standards of honesty and integrity that you apply to your personal relationships? The silence stretched for what felt like forever. Then, Chad stood up abruptly, knocking over his chair. I don't have to listen to this, he said, his voice carrying clearly across the common, thanks to the wireless microphone, still clipped to his shirt. This is harassment, and I won't stand for it. Nobody's harassing you, Chad, I said calmly. I'm just sharing some consumer information with my neighbors. After all, we're a small community. We look out for each other. Chad ripped off the microphone and threw it on the table. Vanessa, we're leaving, now. But Vanessa wasn't moving. She was staring at me with a mixture of horror and fascination, like someone watching a car accident in slow motion. Did you know? She asked quietly. Know what? About the other women, about his history. Chad grabbed her arm. We're not discussing this here. Come on. Actually, I said, stepping down from the stage, I think this is exactly the place to discuss it. After all, you've been discussing my marriage all over town for the past month. Seems only fair to return the favor. The crowd was starting to murmur now, pieces of the puzzle clicking into place for the longtime residents who'd been following the gossip. Chad looked around desperately, realizing that he was surrounded by people who had no reason to take his side over mine. This is insane, he said. Vanessa, tell them. Tell them this is all some kind of misunderstanding. But Vanessa was looking at him like she was seeing him clearly for the first time. Is it true? About the other women? Of course not. He's making it up. Then why are you so upset? Chad opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked around the crowd one more time, then turned and walked away, pushing through the gathering crowd toward the parking lot. Vanessa watched him go, then turned back to me. How long have you known? About 3 weeks. And you planned all this? Every bit of it. She nodded slowly, like she was processing something complex. Then, to my surprise, she started to laugh. You know what the really crazy part is? She said, loud enough for everyone to hear. He wasn't even that good. The crowd erupted in laughter and applause. Someone shouted, "Satisfaction guaranteed!" And pretty soon half the festival was chanting it. But I wasn't done yet. Not quite. The festival ended on a high note, with everyone talking about the most entertaining lobster roll contest in Pine Harbor history. Chad had disappeared completely. According to Jimmy, he'd returned to the shop Sunday morning with a rental truck, loaded up his still-reeking Tesla, and headed back to Boston without a word. Vanessa and I spent Sunday afternoon cleaning up the festival grounds with the other volunteers, working side by side like we hadn't done in months. She was quiet but not hostile, and I could see her thinking through everything that had happened. "So what now?" she asked as we loaded the last of the folding chairs into Tom Patterson's truck. "That depends," I said. "What do you want?" "I want to understand why you didn't just confront me directly. Why all the elaborate revenge?" I considered the question while we walked back to my truck. "Because confronting you directly would have been about us. This way was about showing everyone, including you, exactly what kind of man Chad really was. And you think that justifies humiliating me in front of the entire town? Did I humiliate you? Or did I give you the information you needed to make your own choice?" She was quiet for a long moment. He really did have other women, didn't he? I don't know for sure, but his reaction suggests I wasn't far off. And the Tesla really smelled that bad? Jimmy had to use a hazmat suit to clean it. Despite everything, she smiled at that. "You put fish in his car." "I put fish in his car. That's so juvenile. But effective." We drove home in comfortable silence, and I thought maybe that was